Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Monday, the 8th of July, 2019. And I'm back in mid-Wales in the lee of Cadair Idris. I might do a bit of hill walking today, but not sure I'm going to specify which hill I shall be climbing, as I have no desire to run into the same people that Robin Cook ran into a number of years ago when he was out hill walking after calling into question the veracity of Tony Blair's claims that basically there was justification for invading Iraq, and being a man of principle, he resigned his position as Foreign Secretary in disgust at Tony Blair's lies and deceit. Well, yesterday was the 14th anniversary of the London bombings, which occurred on the 7th of July 2005, colloquially known as 7/7. Well, Tony Blair, of course, was the Prime Minister at that time, and that event in London, or those events, because allegedly 4 bombs went off that day, but those events were orchestrated in a bid to restore some credence to Tony Blair's Prime Minister role, because he'd just taken a mauling at the polls, although Labour still had a very significant majority, 66 I believe it was, and but they lost 100 seats in terms of the majority, because prior to that election they had a majority of 166. And the reason that Blair took a massive mauling in the poll was because the British public were beginning to realise that he had lied the country into yet another illegal war, ostensibly as George Bush's poodle, George W. Bush's poodle, that is. I'm going to get out of the sun a bit here. Getting a bit of camera reflection there. Anyway, so Tony Blair, and of course, he was only actually got back in thanks to postal votes, because 2005 is the year that the rules on postal votes were modified to open them up to more people. And the fear was that Tony Blair was going to get trounced in his home constituency of Sedgefield. Despite the ballot paper being stuffed, the concern was that Reg Keyes, the father of a soldier who was killed in one of Blair's illegal wars, stood against Blair, and the concern was that he had the popular support. So postal votes were brought in, and if you look at the official 2005 election results, you'll see that the number of voters registered in Sedgefield was 66,666. What a coincidence. Anyway, Blair happened to be chairing the G8 summit at Gleneagles 14 years ago. And it was during the summit, in fact, the second day of that summit, that the bombs allegedly went off in London on the morning of July the 7th. Yet, there has never been any independent inquiry into the events of that day. And what is remembered by most is simply the official narrative, which is that 4 young Muslims, 3 of whom came down from the Leeds area, met up with another one at Luton Station, and then they took a train to London, and then before going their separate ways, and 3 set off their bombs of a very volatile homemade mixture on tube trains, and the 4th apparently on a bus that exploded at Tavistock Square in London. Yet the evidence would suggest that something other than what is presented as the official narrative actually occurred. First of all, the bomb that went off on the train at Edgware Road could not possibly have been caught by the young lad, because the train that they caught at Luton didn't get into King's Cross until after that tube train had left King's Cross station. And there were major problems that morning due to signalling failures, and all of which contrived to make it extremely difficult for the official narrative to hold water. But of course, no one dares to challenge the official storyline, for fear that if they do, their career will be over and they will never again actually find work within the whore media. So, apart from the fact that whether the bombs went off or not, they probably did. A number of people were certainly injured and probably a number killed. But the reality is that this was not perpetrated by 4 disaffected Muslims. The more likely narrative is that they were stooges, that they were role-playing, that they'd been convinced to help the security services by participating in an exercise. So much so that when the bombs did start to go off, these 4 lads realised that they had probably been set up, and there is evidence to suggest that they made their way to Canary Wharf, probably in the hope of sort of going to the media and reporting that, basically they had been commissioned to participate in an exercise and they had nothing to do with these bombs going off. But there's also the evidence to show that there were some assassinations that morning. And in fact, an academic by the name of Professor Rory, I want to say Ridley Scott, but I think it's Ridley-duff. Rory Ridley-duff from Sheffield Hallam University wrote a paper, and that paper was What Really Happened at Canary Wharf on the morning of July 7th, 2005. And if you could find that paper, you will find that there is more empirical evidence to show that those lads made their way to Canary Wharf and were assassinated. They were taken out by the British military to prevent the narrative from unfolding. Well, it wasn't over, was it? Because then on July 22nd, Cressida Dick, who yesterday laid a wreath in commemoration of those who lost their lives on July 7th, 2005, she was the Gold Commander on July 22nd, the morning of July 22nd, when she authorised the assassination of Jean-Charles de Menzies, who was mistakenly identified, apparently, as an associate of the 4 alleged perpetrators from the July 7th bombing. Now, she authorised his assassination. He was assassinated by British Special Forces using dum-dum bullets. He was shot with 11 dum-dum bullets. 7 went into his head, 3 into his shoulder, and 1 missed. Cressida Dick has a lot to answer for. Of course, she's never shared what information was available to her on that morning. And of course, she's rewarded for carrying out that assassination by being awarded and appointed to the highest police role in the country, Chief Constable of the Metropolitan Police. So very, very little that occurs in the political and geopolitical arena is what it is presented to be by the lamestream media. But it requires people to keep a completely open mind, to shut down that perverse belief that the establishment is there to look after their best interests, that the establishment is there to do what is best for the proletariat. The establishment is there to protect the corporatocracy. And if that means creating wars, if that means assassinating a few people along the way, then that's all part of the collateral. And people either just don't want to know, they just want to get on with their daily lives, or they're scared about even broaching these subjects. The London bombings, for anybody that is over the age of, let's say, 20, 25, 30, should be a subject that is researched, because this is prima facie evidence of the magnitude to which the rogue elements within the security services, probably going way beyond the British security services, this is rogue elements within the security services of the US, the UK, and of course Israel. And their job is to prop up the narrative and to scare those who want to challenge that narrative into silence. Well, they're looking at a whole new range of technology now. So not satisfied with being able to control the narrative through the media, they now want to be able to control it through technology. And of course, this is exactly as was presented by Marion King Hubbard and Howard Scott in their document Technocracy Inc. in 1932. This, of course, the theme was further developed by the report from Iron Mountain, published in 1967, and that was then taken up by Zbigniew Brzezinski in his seminal book, Between Two Ages, The Technotronic Era, which he wrote in 1969 and published in 1970. And anyone who hasn't read Between Two Ages absolutely needs to read that book, considering that it was written 50 years ago. And basically, it lays out the agenda for everything that's happening right now. Of course, back then they didn't have the technology. Now they have the technology, which is being rolled out at a phenomenal rate of knots. None more so than, of course, 5G. And over the weekend in Australia, an article appeared in the Australian edition of the Daily Mail, and the headline there was, "Is 5G bad for your health? Fears over new superfast network amid claims it emits harmful radiation." Well, it's of course an interesting article that raises the concerns, which of course are then dismissed by the industry. But what is very interesting is one of the final comments attributed to, I'm going to just find the article here, the principal for Telstra's electromagnetic energy strategy, Mike Wood. And he was quoted as saying, "The company is going to keep a close eye on the millimeter wave radiation." Now, that is a very, very telling statement. They're going to keep a close eye on it because they are not sure that it's safe. They've been told it's safe because their salary depends on them perpetuating that point of view. But Mike Wood here is hedging his bets by saying we're going to keep a close eye on it. So what this means is that they're really not sure. They know there are concerns out there, and they're just keeping their fingers crossed because they know there are no independent studies which prove 5G frequencies to be safe. Indeed, quite the opposite. And an increasing number of scientists throughout the world are now calling for a moratorium on the rollout of 5G due to concerns about the impact that the frequencies will have on all organic life. Let me just repeat that. The effect that 5G frequencies will have on all organic life. So, as is always the case, not everyone is necessarily going to be affected in the same way. But, we know that there are a lot of people who are already suffering due to their electromagnetic sensitivity. And with 5G and the transmitters being erected every 150, 200 meters, then of course the likelihood is that an increasing number of people are going to find that they suffer adverse reactions to the 5G frequencies. And of course at first they're not going to know what causes it because it's not something that's visible. It's not something that they've contracted by coming into contact with somebody. But eventually, as neighbor talks to neighbor and work colleague talks to work colleague, then people are going to join the dots and they're going to realize that all the concerns that were being expressed about 5G technology had some validity. But, it's the same with fracking, where Brian Monk said the easiest rig to stop is the first rig going in to drill the first well. The most difficult one to stop is the 10,000th rig going in to drill the 10,000th well. Well, it's a bit like this with 5G. There are a number of 5G masts already erected around the country. Of course, this is what EE and Vodafone have been bragging about, that the lucky people of those chosen cities now have access to 5G network capability. But of course, their game plan is to roll it out right across the country over the next 18 months or so. So we've got a number of 5G events coming up, and of course the whole purpose of these events is to stimulate curiosity. Just like the London bombings, you know, there will be people who go, oh my goodness me, that's just a rampant conspiracy theory. Of course, that's what you're meant to think. That is weaponized vocabulary to shut down independent empirical research that looks at the facts, not just the narrative that's pumped out by the government. What's interesting, of course, is that the British government felt it was absolutely necessary to produce their own narrative as to what they believe occurred on that fateful day back in July of 2005. No name was put to it, no author. I mean, it's Jackanory. It's literally what the establishment wants you to believe without any reference to the hard facts. And it's the same here with 5G. The establishment just wants you to accept that it's going to get rolled out. The telecoms companies just want you to accept, but I can absolutely assure you that the telecoms companies can no longer deny that they are not aware of the increasing concerns, because people are going along to 5G trade events. People are leaving the appropriate comments on particularly Vodafone's website, and in response to articles that these telecom companies are releasing, bragging about the new technology rollout. So this, over the next couple of weeks, we have a number of events. Next Saturday, I will be in London, an event at the Conway Hall, Red Lion Square, just a few minutes from Holborn Station. That's Holborn Tube Station. And that event starts at 7:30, and I gather that Sasha Stone will be sharing the platform with me there. And of course, we'll be asking the question, you know, is 5G, is it safe? And we'll be looking at the concerns and trying to stimulate people's curiosity to look at this for themselves and then decide for themselves whether it's something they're just going to sit back and let happen, or whether or not they're going to make an active effort to try and ensure that not only this, but any other technology is not rolled out until such time as it is proven to be safe. And on Monday, we get down to Exeter, and we're at the Exeter Phoenix, which is in Gandy Street in Exeter. And advance tickets are available from the Phoenix, and I'll put a phone number where you can phone to book tickets there directly from the Exeter Phoenix. I'll put it under this video. Then on Tuesday, we go to the Seven Stars Hotel in Totnes. Then on Thursday, we're in Torquay. And then the following Thursday, I should be in Swansea. And these are precursor events to the 5G Is It Safe tour, which will kick off in Bristol on the 9th of September. Now, you know, already there is a groundswell building. Increasingly, communities are coming together to look at the likely impact if 5G is rolled out in their communities. And the communities that are taking the lead here certainly seem to be Totnes, Glastonbury, Frome, Trafford in the Manchester suburbs. And all of these communities have put pressure on their local authorities to do whatever they feel needs to be done to resist this technology being rolled out and the effects perpetrated on the residents of those communities, purely on the basis that the telecoms companies say, oh, you got nothing to worry about. Well, the local authorities are, in some cases now, stepping up to the plate and they're doing their own due diligence, and they are starting to ask the right questions and telling the phone companies that they will not permit 5G infrastructure to be rolled out in their communities until such time as they see independent evidence which proves 5G frequencies to be safe. And if you've got any time on your hands, then do take a look at the events of the London bombings. And of course, one of the most remarkable coincidences of that day was security consultant Peter Power, who went on to ITV News and Radio 5 Live at around about 5:30 on the afternoon of that day, stating that what a surprise, because that morning he'd been running an exercise based on bombs going off at exactly the same 3 stations where the bombs went off that morning. Peter Power went onto the media to cover his butt, to make sure that he couldn't be targeted by the same forces that assassinated the 4 young stooges who had been set up to create the exercise. And the exercise was a front, so that if anything did go wrong, i.e. if anything was discovered, then they could say, oh, it was just an exercise. We were just testing security on the London Underground. No, you weren't. You were trying to bolster Tony Blair's declining popularity, taking advantage of a gullible population and keep it in fear of the threat from the Middle East. Well, any threat that comes from the Middle East is very much of the making of the UK, of the US, and Israel. You have a great day, and I'll be back on Wednesday morning at 8:30. You take care now.